Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So today we are back to talk about some of my anticipated releases for 2021. Just a little selection of the books that I'm really excited for. But first off, of course, it's Vlogmas, so I've got to show you the Christmas jumper. Once again, this is one of my sister's ones, and for the first time, it's not one that I used to own. Woo! So yeah, it just has this lovely like little pharaoh print grey, and my favourite colour, which is blue, and I think goes quite nicely with my little earrings here. You know, just to zhuzh it up a little bit. Yeah, I quite like this. But now onto the books. Now I'm filming this a little bit in advance. I'm filming this in November, so even though I think I've been able to get a good like cross-section of different catalogues from publishers, there may still be a few things that haven't been announced yet. I feel especially where my list is lacking is in fiction. I just could not, for the life of me, find a whole load of fiction books that I was really excited by. It did tend to be more non-fiction titles. But I feel like on some level that should be really interesting, because I feel like a lot of the anticipated releases videos that I watch are, you know, it is majority fiction and a lot of it is YA, which is not what I typically tend to read. First off, we have Hello Habits, A Minimalist Guide to Better Life by Fumio Sasaki. This comes out on the 5th of January and is written by the author of one of my favourite pieces of minimalist non-fiction, which is Goodbye Things on Minimalist Living. I feel like 2015, and especially since Marie Kondo came out with The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, there's been a real proliferation of different like minimalist intentional living books. But Fumio Sasaki's book was definitely my favourite, so I'm really interested to see what he's written here. I'm also a fan of a productivity book, so the combination of the author and the subject matter will definitely make it an anticipated book for me. Fumio Sasaki changed his life when he became a minimalist, but before minimalism could really stick, he had to make it a habit. All of us live our lives based on the habits we've formed, from when we get up in the morning to what we eat and drink to how likely we are to actually make it to the gym. In Hello Habits, Sasaki explains how we can acquire the new habits that we want and get rid of the ones that don't do us any good. Drawing on leading theories and tips about the science of habit formation from cognitive psychology, neuroscience and sociology, along with examples from popular culture and tried and tested techniques from his own life, he unravels common misperceptions about willpower and talent and offers a step-by-step guide to success. Ultimately, Sasaki shows how ordinary people like himself can use his principles of good habit making to improve themselves and change their lives. I feel like a lot of productivity manuals that I've seen in the past are usually not particularly well grounded. They're usually written by like high-flying corporate executives who are just like, yes, maximize your life, and you too can become a multimillionaire if you wake up at 3:30 in the morning, yeah. Whereas I feel like this is going to be a little bit more down to earth, so I'm really looking forward to it. Next up is a fiction title, and it is The Lonely Fajita by Abigail Mann, and can we just have a second for this cover? Isn't that how most of us have spent 2020? I feel like this is one of those 2020 releases that just kept on being pushed back and back. It's Alyssa's birthday and she's accidentally booked a cervical smear instead of a celebration. Great. Yeah, I feel ya. The icing on the cake? Her boyfriend is kicking her out of their house share. So when she's offered the chance to live with a pensioner rent-free, Alyssa knows she needs to impress Annie, who turned down the last 22 applicants. Somehow, even after Alyssa goes about definitely not being an axe murderer, Annie chooses her. And just like Alyssa, prickly, sweary and big-hearted Annie could use a friend. Alyssa may have nowhere else to go, but is she just where she needs to be? This book kind of reminds me of like a mashup between both The Flat Share and The Switch by Beth O'Leary. I feel like if you like either of those books, you'll definitely like this. And that comes out on the 21st of January. Next up is a Tudor non-fiction book, which I saw, I'm sure, on like a Michael Joseph catalogue, and now I just cannot find anywhere. It's not on Amazon, I can't find a trace of it anywhere, and it is The Fall of the House of Dudley by Dr. Joanne Paul. I feel like I was kind of intrigued by this because it reminded me very much of The Fall of the House of Byron. This, I believe, chronicles the prospects of the House of Dudley. The most notable member of this family, probably to most Tudor fans, being Robert Dudley, who was the Queen's favourite. There's always been a lot of rumour and speculation as to whether the Virgin Queen, Elizabeth I, actually was a virgin, and if she wasn't, then it was probably Robert Dudley who did the deed. However, of course, despite the fact that he was her favourite, and most people declare that he was her one true love, they never married. But I feel like this is not just going to be focused on Robert Dudley, it's going to be about the whole family. From my notes here, I know that this is meant to come out around about March time, but once again, cannot find any details about it anywhere else. Next up, a fiction book that I am really intrigued to see what lots of people think about it is Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi, who is the author of Homegoing. I believe that this has had publication in America already, but it doesn't come here until the 4th of March. As a child, Gifty would ask her parents to tell the story of their journey from Ghana to Alabama, seeking escape in myths of heroism and romance. When her father and brother succumb to the hard reality of immigrant life in the American South, their family of 4 becomes 2, and the life Gifty dreams of slips away. Years later, desperate to understand the opioid addiction that destroyed her brother's life, she turns to science for answers. But when her mother comes to stay, Gifty soon learns that the roots of their tangled traumas reach farther than she ever thought. Tracing her family's story through continents and generations will take her deep into the dark heart of modern America. Transcendent Kingdom is a searing story of love, loss, and redemption, and the myriad ways that we try to rebuild our lives from the rubble of our collective pasts. Next up, we have what looks like another cute little rom-com. This is The Littlest Library by Poppy Alexander and comes out on the 18th of March. Jess Metcalfe is perfectly happy with her quiet, predictable life. It's just the way she likes it. But when her beloved grandmother passes away and she loses her job at the local library, her life is turned upside down. Packing up her grandmother's books, she moves to a tiny cottage in a charming country village. To her surprise, Jess finds herself the owner of an old red telephone box too, and she soon turns it into the littlest library around. It's not long before the books are borrowed and begin to work their magic. Somehow, they seem to be bringing the villagers together once more. Maybe it's finally time for Jess to follow her heart and find a place to call home. And I don't know, I think the combination of, you know, libraries and books and romantic comedy, yeah, I'm sold. Next up, coming out on the 1st of April, we have Europe, A History of Its People by Anthony Teasdale. The first one-volume complete history of Europe as told by Europeans themselves, from Homo erectus to the Celts to Greek wisdom and Roman grandeur, all the way to the European phenomenon, the Industrial Revolution. This is the definitive way to discover the real modern Europe progressively unfolding, because looking back to the past reveals more about our future than we ever expected. And only by knowing how Europe came to be can we know what really lies ahead. Which I feel like will make really interesting reading, especially with the backdrop of my country's choices that are currently being processed. Next up, also coming out on the 1st of April, is The Drowned City by K.J. Maitland. This is historical fiction set in the 17th century and I believe takes some of the gunpowder plot as part of its narrative. 1606. A year to the day that men were executed for conspiring to blow up Parliament, a towering wave devastates the Bristol Channel. Some proclaim God's vengeance, others seek to take advantage. In London, Daniel Percival lies in prison, waiting to die. But Charles Fitzalan, close advisor to King James I, has a job in mind that will free a man of Daniel's skill from the horrors of Newgate, if he succeeds. For Bristol is a hotbed of Catholic spies, and where better for the lone conspirator who evaded arrest, one Spiro Pettinger, I know I've pronounced that wrong, to gather allies than in the chaos of a drowned city. Daniel journeys there to investigate Fitzalan's lead, but soon finds himself at the heart of a dark Jesuit conspiracy, and in pursuit of a killer. So yeah, a lot of religious division, of course, because it is the 17th century. Seems like a lot of intrigue, a lot of mystery, so I'll be interested to see what people think of this. You know, I said I didn't think I had a lot of fiction here, but actually, there's a fair amount. Because next, coming out on the 15th of April, is Sistersong by Lucy Holland. This is another historical fiction, and I believe takes place in, like, early medieval times. The marketing says that it is a delight for fans of Madeline Miller's Circe, so definitely me. King Cador's children inherit a land abandoned by the Romans, torn by warring tribes. River can cure others, but can't heal her own scars. Keen battles to be seen as the king's son, although born a daughter. And Sinner? Dreams of love, longing for adventure. All three fear a life of confinement within the walls of the Hold, their people's last bastion of strength against the invading Saxons. However, change comes on the day ash falls from the sky, bringing Merton? Anglo-Saxon names kill me. Who is a meddler and magician. The siblings discover the power that lies within them and the land. But fate also brings Tristan, a warrior whose secrets will tear them apart. Riverkeen and Sinner become entangled in a web of treachery and heartbreak and must fight to forge their own paths. It's a story that will shape the destiny of Britain. Sistersong by Lucy Holland retells the folk ballad The Two Sisters, now including the perspective of the sibling that time forgot. It's a powerfully moving story, perfect for fans of Naomi Novik's Uprooted and Catherine Arden's The Bear and the Nightingale. So rather than being just like straight historical fiction, this also seems to take in a little bit of fantasy or magical realism, considering that it's being compared to Naomi Novik and Catherine Arden. So interesting, not my usual bag at all. Like, even within historical fiction, that is not my usual time period, like just after the Romans have left. There we will see. A book that is definitely up my alley when it comes to historical fiction is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. This comes out on the 29th of April and tells the story of the daughter of King Minos, who ends up helping Theseus when he battles the Minotaur. As princesses of Crete and daughters of the fearsome King Minos, Ariadne and her sister Phaedra grow up hearing the hoofbeats and bellows of the Minotaur echo through the labyrinth beneath the palace. The Minotaur, Minos's greatest shame, and Ariadne's brother demand blood every year. When Theseus, Prince of Athens, arrives in Crete as a sacrifice to the beast, Ariadne falls in love with him. But helping Theseus kills the monster means betraying her family and country. and Ariadne knows only too well that in a world ruled by mercurial gods, drawing their attention can cost you everything. In a world where women are nothing more than the pawns of powerful men, will Ariadne's decision to betray Crete for Theseus ensure her happy ending? Or will she find herself sacrificed for her lover's ambition? Ariadne gives a voice to one of the forgotten women of one of the most famous Greek myths, and speaks to their strength in the face of angry, petulant gods. Beautifully written and completely immersive, this is an exceptional debut novel. Oh, so that's interesting. I didn't know that this was a debut. But yeah, as you know, I recently have been going through Stephen Fry's Greek myth retellings, and in Heroes is where you get the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. It's a story that I've always been really drawn to because when I was in year 5, I think, I actually played Theseus in a school play. Because obviously I went to one of those primary schools where none of the boys wanted to act, so I was like, hello, me. But interestingly, when we did the story of Theseus and the Minotaur, Ariadne was never mentioned. So it wasn't really a story that I knew much about until I read Stephen Fry's Heroes. And yeah, Ariadne is really hard done by Theseus. So I feel like this will be very revealing, but also kind of heartbreaking. Next up is a history non-fiction which has the perfect title to encapsulate the whole of 2020, which is Doom. Doom, the Politics of Catastrophe. This comes out on the 6th of May and is basically about how we, through history, have reacted to disasters. Spoilers! Not great. Disasters are by their very nature hard to predict. Pandemics like earthquakes, wildfires, financial crises and wars are not normally distributed. There is no cycle of history to help us anticipate the next catastrophe. But when disaster strikes, we ought to be better prepared than the Romans were when Vesuvius erupted, or medieval Italians when the Black Death struck. We have science on our side after all. Yet the responses of a number of developed countries to a new pathogen from China were badly bungled. Why? The facile answer is to blame poor leadership. While populist rulers have certainly performed poorly in the face of the pandemic, more profound problems have been exposed by COVID-19. Only when we understand the central challenge posed by a disaster in history can we see that this was also a failure of an administrative state and of economic elites that had grown myopic over much longer than just a few years. Drawing from multiple disciplines including history, economics, public health and network science, Doom, the Politics of Catastrophe is a global post-mortem for a plague year. Well, that sounds delightful. You know, really a book to put you in a peppy mood. I don't even know if Doom is really a book that I myself am interested in reading, or if it's just that I'm really keen to hear other people's opinions of it. However, a history book that I think is slightly more on my wavelength is The Case of the Married Woman, Caroline Norton, a 19th century heroine who wanted justice for women by Lady Antonia Fraser. Poet, pamphleteer and beauty, Caroline Norton dazzled 19th century society with her vivacity and intelligence. After her marriage in 1828 to the MP George Norton, she continued to attract friends and admirers to her salon in Westminster, which included the young Disraeli. Most prominent among her admirers was the widowed Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne. Racked with jealousy, George Norton took the Prime Minister to court, suing him for damages on account of his criminal conversation, adultery, with Caroline. A dramatic trial followed. Despite the unexpected and sensational result, acquittal, Norton legally denied Caroline access to her 3 children under 7. He also claimed her income as an author for himself, since the copyrights of a married woman belonged to her husband. Yet Caroline refused to despair. Beset by the personal cruelties perpetrated by her husband and a society whose rules were set against her, she chose to fight, not surrender. She channeled her energies in an area of much needed reform, the rights of a married woman, and specifically those of a mother. Over the next few years, she campaigned tirelessly, achieving her first landmark victory with the Infant Custody Act of 1839. Provisions which are now taken for granted, such as the right of a mother to have access to her own children, owe much to Caroline, who was determined to secure justice for women at all levels of society, from the privileged to the dispossessed. I remember when I was doing my A-levels and we were learning particularly about the suffrage movement, Caroline was used many, many times as a previous case of married women not having rights to their children. I remember just being so shocked. I mean, I don't know if shocked was the right word because like you knew that it was going on, but like actually being able to see these people who are being affected right in front of you is like, ugh. Once again, a reason to study history, because really when you think about the timeline of human history, you know, the 19th century was not actually that long ago, and it's just a message of how you cannot take these rights for granted. Next up is the final installment of a book series that I personally have not read yet, but I really want to, and it is the final installment of Alison Weir's 6 Tudor Queens series, and this is of course Catherine Parr, the 6th wife. I'm not gonna lie to you, when I look at this, I'm kind of a bit disappointed because all of the other taglines for the queens were very interesting. So you've got Catherine Howard, who was the Tainted Queen, Anna of Cleve, who was Queen of Secrets, Jane Seymour, the Haunted Queen, Catherine of Aragon, the True Queen, Anne Boleyn, A King's Obsession, and then you've got Catherine Parr, who's just the 6th wife. I don't know if they're going to expand on that and give it a different name, but meh. 2 husbands dead, a boy and a sick man, and now Catherine is free to make her own choice. The aging king's eye falls upon her, she cannot refuse him. or betray that she wanted another. She becomes the sixth wife, a queen and a friend. Henry loves and trusts her, but Catherine is hiding another secret in her heart, a deeply held faith that could see her burn. Catherine Parr, Henry's final queen, her story. And that final instalment comes out on the 13th of May. On a similar tack, we have Sister to Sister by Olivia Hayfield, which comes out on the 27th of May. Now, you might recognise the name Olivia Hayfield because she was the author of Wife After Wife, Divorced, Murdered, Died, which was the modern retelling of Henry VIII and his 6 wives, which I was just so thrilled was out. It's not one that I've read yet, but I'm definitely wanting to get around to it. This is the follow-up, the sequel to that, and instead of focusing on Henry's wives, it focuses instead on Henry's daughters. The modern analogies for Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth I. And I am so hyped. Like I say, I definitely need to read Wife After Wife first, but yay. Next up for history non-fiction, we have The History Makers, 2,500 Years of Who We Are by Richard Cohen. This comes out on the 27th of May 2021 and is basically about the history of history, how the way that we have told stories about the past has changed over the last 2,000 years. The History Makers is an epic exploration of who writes about the past and how the biases of certain storytellers, whether Julius Caesar, William Shakespeare or Simon Sharma, continue to influence our ideas of history and about who we are today. In this unusually authoritative and supremely entertaining book, Richard Cohen reveals how professional historians and other equally significant witnesses, such as the writers of the Bible, major novelists, dramatists, journalists and political propagandists, influence what become the accepted records of human experience. Is there, he asks, even such a thing as an objective history? The depths of Cohen's inquiry and the delight in which he takes his subjects includes the practitioners of what he calls bad history, those thieves of history who twist reality to glorify themselves and conceal their or their country's behaviour. I feel like that'll be especially poignant right now because there's been so much talk about like statues and about the National Trust. There's been a lot of talk recently about the National Trust and people kind of complaining and protesting the National Trust, kind of wanting to highlight where exploitation, especially slavery, has contributed to these great houses, and people not liking that because revealing like these dark histories to these historic properties, you know, it makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you realise that the people of the past were not as, you know, lovely as you had previously thought, and people for whatever reason do not want to be confronted with that. But I mean, you kind of have to because that's what happened. I'm definitely of the opinion that it is not twisting history to actually reveal more about what happened in the past and to talk about the darker things that happened. I think it's scary for a lot of people because it really ends up distorting the narrative that a lot of people have built up in their heads, especially of Britain, especially of the British Empire, and this idea of, you know, like the Great British Empire. But I think that's a narrative that really needs dismantling anyway, so I'll be interested to see what this book makes of that. And then finally, we have The Times Witness, A History in the Age of Romanticism by Rosemary Hill. From the fall of the Bastille in 1789 to the opening of the Great Exhibition in 1851, history changed. The grand narratives of the Enlightenment concerned with kings and statesmen gave way to a new interest in the lives of ordinary people. Oral history, costume history, the history of food and furniture, of Gothic architecture, theatre, and much else were explored as never before. Antiquarianism, the study of the material remains of the past, was not new, but now hundreds of men and some women became antiquaries and set about rediscovering their national history in Britain, France, and Germany. The Romantic Age valued facts, but it also valued imagination, and it brought both to the study of history. Among its achievements were the preservation of the Bayeux Tapestry, the analysis and dating of Gothic architecture, and the first publication of Beowulf. It dispelled old myths and gave us new ones. Shakespeare's birthplace, clan tartans, and the arrow of Harold's eye are among its legacies. From scholars to imposters, the dozen or so antiquaries at the heart of this book show us history in the making. I don't know if I've edited this to be a lot shorter, but that felt like it took forever. It's probably because I had to hold my laptop for so long. Ugh. But yes, those are all of the upcoming 2021 releases that I have recently discovered. Like I say, I'm filming this in November, so I know there are probably going to be some more announcements of 2021 books coming out, so I'll be sure to link those down in the description box. Do let me know what 2021 releases you're really interested in, or anything that took your fancy from the list of books that I mentioned. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you are having a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.